Um, to go over his bio very quickly. Chuck is one of the founding members of RealFX. He's been with the company for 22 years, and he's been a leader and innovator in the entertainment space with over 50 projects to his credit in theatrical, location-based, and VR. And so we're really excited to have him here. He's done Lionsgate, JCPenney, AT&T, Samsung. So Chuck, welcome from RealFX.
Thank you.
And next to us is Mike Nichols, who's the VP of Creative for Fuel. And Mike's a 20-year veteran of the gaming industry. A lot of people come from the gaming industry into this space. And working to Microsoft to help define the Connect experience. And now he focuses his attention on the emerging possibilities of AR and VR and Fuel and their clients. And I'll let you explain some of the clients in a minute of what those might be. And then Joseph has his own company, Epicenter VR. He comes from USC. Initially, he's made tons of movies and films and social good and all kinds of commercials. And he's got a film coming out with Sony that I think is playing on AMC, coming out called Lost and Found, that was shot in Canada but takes place in Seattle, right? And he's here with Epicenter VR. I don't know, did I miss any? I mean, there's so much, and all of you guys that I could tell.
That's great. That's the key stuff.
Okay. All right. And then Dave Curry, he works for Pop, a marketing agency, and he spent the last 20 years playing multiple roles at Pop. And Pop's a modern agency built to solve tomorrow's problems today. And I like it. He's a creative technologist who curates vertical specific collections of technology. Very glamorous writing there.
That's impressive.
But everyone here brings their own brand and their own experiences. And this same panel in May, it's amazing how much in 6 months this market has really expanded and grown in technology, and there's so much more out there to work with, and it's really about to be introduced into the mainstream audience. So given that this is a branding and sort of storytelling, marketing panel, one of the first things that we wanted to talk about, is we need to get the audience to be able to adopt to it and learn about it and use it and get past that's the next stage. And so if one of you guys want to start with that, just talking about that piece of it, just getting early adoption and taking it further.
Who's up? Maybe.
I'll jump in real quick and just say something about this. So good morning, and thanks very much for having us. I come from the Hollywood and entertainment world, and now pivoting into virtual reality. The big thing that we had the big exciting splash, of course, over 2 years ago was Facebook's acquisition of Oculus. But when you look at Oculus and you think about adoption, Oculus is a fairly new and fairly expensive piece of hardware for most people across the country and across the world. And so when we began to move into this space in our company, the first thing that we looked at was how can we make sure that it's convenient? Because in my belief, the cadence for adoption is going to go, right? It's going to go here first and then to Oculus second. Unless you're a hardcore gamer, I just don't think that most people are going to rush out and buy an Oculus or a PS4 or any of these kinds of things. Not at first. Their first amuse-bouche, so to speak, an appetizer has to be something that's very, very easy, very cheap, and very broad. So I think it's mobile first, and that's where I think the brands are going to come in. I think that's where the entertainment's going to come in. We had a long pitch meeting and discussion with Warner Brothers about something a couple of days ago, and their first foray is going to be mobile. And they said, great, we'd love for it to be agnostic across all the other platforms as well, but the numbers simply aren't there. So whatever creative concept you design, it has to work with a mobile device.
Yeah, I mean, the statistics show that in 2020, 90% of the globe will have a mobile phone of some sort, of the globe, of the planet, and the ease of use is the key, first of all, for the customer to be able to use it easily and not have to be too tech complicated. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing that, there are companies that are brands that now want to be publishers themselves, like Red Bull, for example, has done a good job of that. But when you go in the process and you're working with a creative agency, you're working with a studio, or you're working with an enterprise business, how do you get them to adopt? Like, what are some of the things that you have to do, because, you know, agencies promise things and maybe, go ahead, Chuck.
I've got a couple of comments there. I think it comes down to two things. There's one of the biggest challenges on projects is having an agency or a client that thinks they understand the space of VR, and does anybody here really understand VR? It's really, we're experts by being in the space for a couple of years, 2 years. That's what constitutes an expert in this world.
We're all still understanding.
We're all understanding, and that's the point. Is I think that the biggest thing for ease of adoption and for the understanding for agencies and clients to understand how to use this is understanding the platform and understanding the mechanics, but also understanding what can and can't be done. We've had clients come in and with high expectations here, and they're just not. They're not.
So what's the first step? Do you give them a demo of something? Do you come in and
Yeah.
you show them, oh, here's something we've done for somebody else, and then?
We're doing something that we're going to go out a little wider with. I call it Nitro Circus because I love X Games kind of things. But the idea of bringing us on tour, like to gather agencies and gather clients and put them through a VR 101, not in a talking down way, but all the stakeholders need to be there, especially the marketing and the sales guys, you know, salespeople.
end user.
Salespeople oversell, right? But if you have your account service people and you have your creatives and you have your technology, you have your platform guys, you have your digital guys, and everybody's there and can understand and actually strap on HTC Vive, understand the limitations of mobile, but also the things that are great about mobile, and do it in an environment so they have context. I think that's the most important thing, and a lot of us are doing that. You know, we brought in a group of 6 or 7 people from a big airline just for 2 hours just to check things out. Now they're going away at a higher level of being informed so that they understand their brand tenets and how that can work in communicating a message. I think that's critical.
Yeah, but also, Dave, so for example, talk about when you get to have that meeting, because the film may be already about to leave, the train's about to leave the station, and say, oh, should have done VR. Well, how do you?
Well, that really, I don't see that happening directly to us where the train has left the station, but I do spend a lot of time giving these demos. And what's great that I've seen from all brands, and don't hit the table, guys, which I think, is everybody.
This is for the streaming audience.
What's great is everybody wants to take that meeting. Like everybody wants to show up, and usually the situation that's common that we end up in is, well, if we have 2 hours and I need you to see everything from cardboard all the way up to HoloLens, I can't do it for 35 people. I can do it for a dozen, and so we try and kind of pace these things out. But I think it is important for everybody you have to see it to believe it. And you have to see it across all the different platforms. And you know, as you go from cardboard up to Vive and Oculus and HoloLens, the level of interactivity and what you're able to do with your content changes very drastically.
Well, that's kind of interesting, because a study came out that there's all these different platforms. Which ones are you? I mean, 61% so far have been Oculus Rift. Like, what are you finding the biggest demand for right now in terms of producing and getting your content out there?
I think at Fuel, we're probably a little bit different in that we don't do a ton of 360 content or filming content. We tend to do more real-time 3D or immersive environments. So that really is dictated by the hardware. We need the hardware to be able to support that, so that puts us into HTC or into an Oculus camp.
I see. So what about you other guys? So what are you finding is trending in terms of what people are wanting you to develop for?
On our side, anything that's tactile, anything that has interactivity is, you know, how do I say this? I always say, and Taylor will get sick of me saying this, but this business is moving in dog years. We're moving so quick. Technology, even concepts that we pitch to clients, be it a studio or somebody, we pulled presentations back because the born-on date was now past. There were innovations, even in process, or seeing things that other companies did that were way cooler that we want to integrate into an experience. That's not a scary thing. That's an exciting thing because it's all moving. But I would say interactivity, the ability to move around your space.
But how do you decide which client should use what? I mean, they're going to ask you, okay, I saw all this and it's all cool and it's interactive and yay, how much does it cost and how can I get it and which is the best one? And so what are the parameters that help them make that decision?
I mean, you guys can all chime in. It depends on their goals.
Yeah,
right?
so
Their end
define
goals.
like 3 levels of goals, for example.
Well, I mean, we see in a lot of cases that reach is very, very important. Like reach is critical, and reach in an Oculus or reach in a Vive is difficult, right? You're not going to reach X number of people, but if you go with Facebook 360 video or you go with YouTube 360 video, the potential to reach millions more, it absolutely exists.
Yeah, I think it's important to approach it not from a technology standpoint, but when you're creative problem solving, you're looking at it like anything. You're understanding the brand, what are the touch points, and most importantly, how do you connect with that brand or that film, and you have to be agnostic in some ways. And because once let the creative drive, the minute that I think that the minute that creative isn't driving the technology, the needs for technology to improve, then we've lost it. We've got to stay ahead of it and always be pushing so that technology is keeping up.
Well, Mike, you just we were talking about the Salesforce data mapping that you did, which is not Salesforce is a product. It's not like a movie or a game. Whereas that experience isn't necessarily you want to reach millions, but you're doing a sales presentation that's going to reach a specific target audience to have an emotional connection and understanding of what the product does. So why don't you tell them about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for that in particular case, there's 2 goals, and one is, do you want an experience that changes a conversation? That, in this sense, we're looking at how data is normally streamed from cities, and we're actually recreating a city. In this case, San Francisco, we do as 1-to-1 scale. We took all the data that's being transmitted out of that city and placed it into virtual objects into that city. This allowed people to actually go and look above the city, be able to see it by using filters and such, so they could see every aspect of how the city was working. It gives them an instant ability to, in a sense, get the situational awareness about the health of their city. So in that case, it's just taking data which comes from a real-world object. You're not obscuring it by a 2D screen. You're actually placing it back into that environment. And just the same ability, and we talk about like presence and stuff that creates great immersion and entertainment. That same ability gives you an incredible view of real-world data.
It's not empathy, but it's that emotional connection. So when they came to you, they said, I want to, like, what was their creative?
Well, it was a completely different ask. And,
the evolution of that.
Yeah, and how we evolved that idea really was born out of, and this all starts from the education part where you bring the client in, you really walk through how the different technologies work. There's a huge delta between a Samsung Gear and an HTC Vive. Those are completely opposites almost.
And I'll add to that conversation, which is anytime the projects I think we've had that are most successful is when we're in earlier the better. A white paper stage. It depends on an agency or a client or a studio. The earlier up the food chain that we can understand what is happening in a movie or in a brand or a launch, the better. Because what we're going to start to do is shape ideas in the language of how that we can extract concepts and ideas tied to the objectives of that movie or to the brand. Yeah. And too often in anybody that's in production, we all suffer when we get something and we all go, God, man, if only they had shot it this way, or if, we've all been there. It's so the preventative part of that is to help identify partners where they're bringing you in as an expert.
It also gives you access to talent, and it's more efficient.
There's a whole.
But one of you joked this morning, I thought it was very funny, that said, we don't want the VR experience to be better than the movie. So, it's like there's a little fine sensitivity there about that. But now you've done all kinds of things. You're a feature film director. You've done commercials, Joseph. You've had a lot of different entry points into storytelling here. So how is that changing coming to you now in this space?
Well, there's two things I want to say that are very pertinent to the last couple of points. And the first one, piggybacking right off of what was just said, is that the best way to save money in this space is to think about it early. So if I'm speaking to a studio or a client or a production company, don't think about the 360 6 months after the VR gaming experience, even 6 months after the movie's done. It's too hard, too expensive, too difficult, too late to go back and get the talent. We're talking with a company right now about it's going to be one of the big tent poles next year, and they did it right. They said, look, while we have these 3 A-list monster actors with their crazy schedules and everything, we're going to make sure that we shoot out the elements that we need for this 360 and full VR gaming experience. We're going to shoot that out while they're on set and while they're together, and that's the way to do it. And so as we're speaking with production companies, and just like you and just like you guys, I mean, I do this dog and pony show every day. I've done it every day for 2 straight years.
Are you the dog or the pony?
Here's the I've got a saddle, I've got a bit. Right?
That's role play.
Oh my gosh.
That's a whole another topic.
Is this that
That's the
panel?
after hours panel, baby.
The next
Right
panel.
into the place that everybody wants to talk
This
about.
panel just took an ugly turn.
100% of the time people get excited about it. 100% of the time they go, this is amazing. And then the question becomes, well, how are they going to activate? And I think that for anybody who's thinking about branded or advertising, it has to solve a problem, and it has to solve a need. So I've gotten very bold now. We do the dog and pony show, and I get through it as quickly as I can, and I watch their eyes glaze over, and they go, oh my God. And then as quickly as I can, because I don't want to have to do 6 more follow-up meetings to get to the question that I want to ask, which is, what's the problem facing your organization? What's the issue that you're having right now? And let's creatively brainstorm about it in the room right this minute to see if a fully CGI VR experience or AR or a 360 video is the tool that can help solve that problem. Because if you don't have a problem, I've seen it now over this happens with all of these guys who come in. They get really excited, but unless it solves a problem for them, then they won't commit the resources of time, budget, etc. to go and get it done. So we just try to accelerate that conversation and be very bold and immediately jump in and say, let's identify your problem so that you walk away from this room with an action plan in mind that you can get to an MVP within your product, within your organization, within your client base, so that we don't have to talk about this 9, 10, 12 months later. So that's just my advice to
Yeah, you're always better off coming with a goal or a problem.
Yeah, I
because
think in
it's
the
gonna change.
sales funnel, you start with why. Why do you need it? And then how. Not how do you get it and then why. You start with why, because that's what the consumer too is going to go, why do I want to watch this? And if you don't know, then they certainly aren't going to know.
And I'd love to say one more thing. So coming out of filmmaking, and in this room are sort of like Hollywood entertainment creators, okay? How many of you of this small handful have been hosed by distribution? So
Twice as many that are actually in the business.
exactly. So, right, I mean, if you go and you raise money independently, or even if you're a studio or a production company, and say you have a lot of power and a lot of reach, unfortunately, you're at the back of the waterfall. That's a big, big problem for anybody who's trying to create content, whether you're just the starry-eyed screenwriter dreamer, or whether you're the brand itself. How can you quickly get further down the line and further upstream in the waterfall so that you're getting as quickly as possible to the eyeballs of your I immediately believe that VR is one of the best and greatest way to get around piracy and get straight to the eyeballs, because over time, I think they're going to be, right, there'll be the hardware, and then there's going to be a distributor, and there's going to become this whole layer that's proportional to what we have now in 2D, right? Theaters, DirecTV, distributor, sales agent, and all these guys are taking all their fees and expenses. But the truth is that right now there's a great opportunity for brands, there's a great opportunity for content creators to get around piracy and all that nonsense and get straight to the eyeballs. And the sooner that we can get people to realize that, the sooner that we're going to solve one of content creators' biggest problems.
But it's not just straight to the eyeballs, it's also the immersive connection that you get to the brand that you can't get from a billboard or you can't get from a publicity story or a link. And I think that's the value proposition that comes out of it once people adopt to it. And, you know, why don't you talk about some of the projects that you're doing, since you're a little bit different in doing the 360 and more in the mobile and the first foray out into adoption. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's going on with POP.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll say one thing that we've been doing is about a year ago, a little over a year ago, we started working with Microsoft on the HoloLens, and we're an agency partner for HoloLens right now. And I'm really interested in the evolution of storytelling, specifically with HoloLens, because Microsoft has this incredible volumetric capture studio where they can shoot 360-degree video. And we're starting to see some things coming out of that space. And
you might want to explain that a little bit, because it's different than 360.
Yeah, so it's hard to describe, but imagine a room that is a giant room that is all green screen, and it's filled with thousands of cameras producing terabytes and terabytes of data per second. So they can shoot action in the 360 and then take that in and turn it into a hologram. Probably a familiar thing people would say is the Star Wars chess scene, right? Back in the first Star Wars movie when they're playing chess. You can actually do that now for real with real live actors. You can also do it with CG too. So I'm really excited to see how those types of things play out. And you know, some other things we've done with HoloLens is bringing, similar to what you were talking about, bringing data visualization to life. We made a match analysis tool for Major League Soccer that allows you to go in and view a holographic play and break it down and figure out where the play went wrong and make annotations and share that with other people. But you know,
why does the consumer, what is the benefit for them? Why would they want to do that in the soccer
Well, for
arena?
this one specifically, it was more of a B2B play, so it was an enterprise-focused application created for coaches and assistant coaches. However, all of the fans and regular consumers that we've shown it to that love soccer, love this experience because they're able to relive a moment in a completely different way. So
It's like capturing a memory.
in a sense, it is like capturing a memory.
Create your own narrative based on all the stuff that you're saying, right? It
Exactly,
completely
turning
changes how you-
statistics into narrative.
Yeah.
Maybe you could give another example of that. You know, you've talked about it. You've talked about it. What about you? Like, where you're taking that data to story? Do you do that with what you're doing?
You know, it's interesting because it doesn't sound as you know, sexy as
It sounds
It's really
dry.
sexy.
environment, right?
No, it is.
But,
We're in marketing.
I mean,
we
you're
do it all
looking
the time.
Yeah, I mean, you're
Goal number one.
You're really looking at, in the case that we created, you're looking at data streaming from a real object, but you'll be able to kind of view that from a perspective that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So that creates a couple things. I mean, we talk about situational awareness, right? Same thing if you're watching a football match. I can get a perspective of like, oh, he made that pass. Here's the trajectory. Oh, if he was just over here. I mean, it creates a different dynamic for the person, and it also creates a sense of I really don't know a better word for this, but like inference, right? And this is a more powerful thing that what's great about human beings. We can do that really quickly just by looking at something where even the most advanced AI can't. So you do get absorbed and sucked into these types of data-driven visuals that
It
are
gives you an
really,
emotional
really compelling.
connection,
Absolutely.
basically.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about, sports and watching sports on TV
Yeah.
and how the visualization of data has become like a really big part of the experience of watching TV. Now imagine the next step is bringing it out of your TV and putting it in your living room with you. And you can experience it in a completely different way.
You mean like
You
a
can
replay,
augment-
like a replay, or
like a
stat of-
replay, but I mean, a lot of like second screen. Remember how many times we used
This
to all
isn't
say,
second
VIP.
screen. It's you are there.
yeah, this is a you are there second
Yeah.
screen essentially.
And I think that getting back to your question and your thought about emotion and creating intimacy, I think for me, if I could create any piece of technology, and again, getting back to this idea of solving a problem, I'd figure out how to relive my childhood or now that I have children, I'd figure out how to keep my children, so that one day when I'm old, I can go back and feel them as 3 years old. Now, we're looking way down the line, but I think that...
There's a reason why Facebook bought Oculus.
Ready Player One.
Can you get rid of some memories? You can edit.
In a way, AR
We need
does...
to be filming this now.
No, but in
Sorry,
a way,
kids.
Pokemon Go, with its augmented reality, you're able to map to a brand that people knew. So the parents who did the trade collecting with their kids, and now they get to go out and do it as a family experience.
Right.
And so in a way, that kind of is doing what you're talking about, like being able to relive. Everybody gets to relive that memory through that experience.
So we're doing something right now at the Kennedy Center. John F. Kennedy's 100th birthday centennial celebration is this year. And we all went, boy, if only we had captured John F. Kennedy, right, in VR 50 years ago when he was still alive. With AI, we could actually make it possible for you to have a conversation with him, to walk around and be in his presence. And so they went, well, we should get on this with Barack Obama, right, immediately, and get that conversation going, because that's how we can now begin to
Historically,
catalog.
yeah.
Right now we're talking about Smithsonian level archival of the human experience. Now, what you just mentioned with the terabytes and terabytes and terabytes per second is going to make it a little bit prohibitive right now. But if you think about the long-term benefits of something like that, I think that's where it can go well outside of just tech, outside of advertising, well outside of entertainment, and turn into something that's truly beneficial for our species.
Yeah,
That sounds
compression right
pretty
now
cool.
is really very important. I saw this panel where he was talking about he had the 32 cameras and with Huawei and how compression is, but the technology is coming. It's just that, it takes forever to process all that data and turn it into something that is experiential.
Yeah.
And speaking of experiential, so taking that now to theme parks and travel businesses and kiosks, and you have a movie and you got a great virtual, and maybe it does require the glasses or some kind of demonstration out of home. Where is that right now in this industry?
I'll address a little bit of that. I think that's an important part. We're all talking about virtual reality, and the virtual part is the part that we're all exploring. But you have to maintain a reality. Like some of the best experiences, and I think some of the most impactful things, are when we come back and break that back to a physical element. Mm-hmm. Location-based entertainment is part of that. Mm-hmm. Having the tactile side of that experience within a activation is super important. It could be as simple as, we did a Hilton Hotels piece, and it was the shoot was pretty complex. It was Barbados, under the water. It was,
Sounds terrible, Chuck.
It's terrible. Why was it taking 3 months? No, just kidding. I didn't get to go to that one. But we had this incredible footage of a resort for Hilton. But then the activation was the cool part. The Gear VR was hidden in these, in New York they have the telescopes on top of buildings and you can look around. And they set these little telescopes downtown New York in the middle of winter. And they were just sitting there and had Gear VR in them. And then cameras were set up to capture people as they came up, and their curiosity got the best of them. And when they looked through it, they were experiencing a 360 Barbados, exactly where you'd want to be on a wintry day.
Wow.
To me, or there's a project, we didn't do this, but it was called, it was for the film The Wire. Anybody try that experience?
I heard about it.
So it's basically, it was the Twin Towers when they tied the rope, the guy walked between it. And for the experience that traveled in some of the theaters, they just took a little rope, put it down. They had a picture on the floor of looking down in the New York skyline. They had a small platform, and a fan that you couldn't see. That's pretty basic, right? My kid has that in his room. You strap on VR, but the minute you get on that and you take your shoes off and you feel the wire under your feet, and the fan is blowing, half those people couldn't get across. I couldn't get across. It is, and it's, but that's what we're talking about is those, and whether it's haptics, whether it's feedback, it's small activations.
Will you
or
explain
the
haptics just in case the people, do
haptics
people know what haptics are?
Anything that gives you feedback, including rumbles, like rumble packs or haptic feedback. We did the AT&T, the American Express Maria Sharapova thing. So when you use the tennis racket, basically it had gyro in it that allowed you to give feedback. Felt like a real tennis racket. So anything that simulates real world feedback.
But where do you draw the line? I mean, there's a lot of things in journalism they're using it. The New York Times, a lot of publications, and then some publications have no problems just taking you out into a marine battlefield and seeing real. I mean, how much can the human take? Like, how do you know? You can only go like 30 miles per hour or something, or they get motion sickness. How do you know where to draw the line with the emotional connection, and not go so that it's so scary? I mean, you pay to go to a theme park, and you know you're going to be scared, and then you get off the ride. So you know it's not real, but it feels so real. How do you know where to balance that?
Can I mention for the theme park, how many of you are familiar with what Samsung did with Six Flags? A couple here? I mean, that to me is a brilliant execution of taking something that exists. So Six Flags has roller coasters everywhere, right? You ride the roller coaster X number of times and you might not ever ride it again because it's the same experience. But with VR, you put on a VR headset, it is mapped to the roller coaster, and now that experience can be whatever they want to make it in VR. And I think that is a brilliant pairing of...
And Universal, we're doing the Despicable Me ride. So we do theme park rides.
Yeah.
So we did we're doing for Japan now. We did it and they're experimenting a lot in that space, which is matching the physical reality of a space. There's a big project. It's called the Void, which is basically a room.
Right.
That,
they did a Ghostbusters activation in New York.
Ghostbusters was the first one.
Right.
All of this category in China, it's everywhere, by the way. They have VR rooms, game rooms that they are small footprints where you can come up there and pay your 25 RMB and strap in and play a game for 15 minutes.
So you could put it in a mall to create.
But anyway,
get
we're in
people to come in.
the middle of a bunch of conversations on content in a physical space. Imagine a physical space, a tiny little, and the physical space can be reconfigured, slightly. So then the content that is in your head, in your gear, is mapped in essence. It's
To this room, for
and then all of a sudden so it's easy to change, and there's other elements that you play. So there's a lot of that. That is moving. That's an area of talking about consumer adoption. If it's my family members, my mom barely knows what I do. She still calls it artistry. Okay, Mom,
What are you,
artistry.
a creative technologist?
Mom, really, that's
I
good.
like that.
Just go
I'm
with
gonna steal
artistry,
that.
right?
Artistry.
She says it with a Portuguese accent, which even makes it funnier. My little son, it's artistry. But the whole point is when the consumer adoption for me is important. All touch points, whether it's Gear VR, it's cardboard, or if it's Oculus and everything in between, anything that they feel like they've touched something and walk away.
And it's easy.
And it's easy.
And they don't have to
this
do
is
anything.
what I
They don't
like
have to give
about
up their
this space.
privacy.
Yeah. As they walk in, it's foolproof. They've experienced something that they could never experience anywhere before. And the impact of that,
Is viral.
yeah.
And
They
it
become
solves-
brand
look,
ambassadors.
That right there solves a need, right? Getting back to this
Yeah.
idea of problem and need, for the client, they'll spend the money because now they don't have to go out and it's scalable for them. They don't have to get however many acres and build this ride that's only repeatable a certain number of times. It's something that they could probably live in a pod. They could load 50 of them on a truck and take them to county fairs, et cetera, et cetera. So it's because it's so scalable, it suddenly works. And I think that's where you're going to start to see adoption, not just from the consumers, because the consumers will consume all kinds of things, right? But from the people who are going to finance the projects, it has to make sense. Thinking from a business standpoint, has to make sense.
Well, even the Smithsonian on the project that you're working on, you can take that out to schools and map it to education. Right. Like Participant Media did a lot of things around the Lincoln film, and took it out to schools and worked with Scholastic. And imagine if you could take Lincoln, like you were talking about JFK or something, and be able to enhance the experience of the learning and cross-promoting with your film that you want to, of course, make money on.
I have a thought on that. Actually, it comes from a project we did called It Can Wait for AT&T. I don't know if anybody was familiar with this, but the whole category is social good and social cause is massive, because the need is often life-threatening or life-changing issues in the world, and we're partners with Oculus on a project called Oculus for Good right now. which is 10 filmmakers, 10 charitable projects that we're working with the filmmakers along with a couple other partners to develop their experiences, which will go off and impact people, right? So as a brand, and if there's brand people in here, because I know that's part of the topic, is often your entry point might not be about your product, but it might be about something that has a social good or social cause
Yeah, you
connected
get
to
a
it.
corporate social responsibility.
Exactly. But I think the caution there is it's a smart world. Authenticity is, you can sniff out what's real and what's not. Now for AT&T, what was super cool about this is texting is a terrible thing with kids these days in cars driving.
Adults too.
So we created an experience that tied to an advertising spot that went out, slow motion shot, commercial, mom turns around with a kid, and as she's texting a 2-word thing, she gets in a violent car wreck. It's super slow motion, you tumble, right? So we took that and created the VR experience, and that tours at schools in a little cardboard box, but with a real steering wheel, a sub pack, and these kids, it's impactful. For that moment, now for AT&T, that was a massively successful outreach because it was authentic. It was something that it was an issue with their product.
And it puts you inside of that experience.
Inside out, not
It
outside
is-
in. Yep.
Exactly, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and then the next time you go to buy a phone, you think, well, because that kid is now driving, that kid was 8 and is now 15, and they're going to go AT&T Cares, and you get that halo effect from that experience.
Sorry, my kid's not driving until he's 20.
This touches, though, a little bit on a previous subject we were talking about, how to get awareness, and it's something that brands, I think, need to be aware of. It's really not that difficult when you have a good experience, when you develop a good experience in VR in particular. That draw, that personal draw, is like 10x, 100x. I mean, people will go out and pull people into the experience. That's pretty much a given. And the time and the awareness that they have in there, their brains are on full record. It's amazing. The other part, though, is getting the eyeballs and the awareness. You do need to think about approaching it as, in these cases, you've got a particular place where this is a physical location where this is going to be. But to get the awareness, you actually need to shoot something, right, that people will see, and that really is a 2D approach. And that is a different project altogether.
Well, it's supplemental.
If you don't do that, there's really not that broad awareness.
Right.
It's just that community-based.
But there's a lot of people out there who are rushing out because, oh, it's cool and I want to do it, and there's concern, there's been concern. It doesn't seem to be as much this time as it was 6 months ago, but it's still a concern. It kind of happened with 3D, where they rush out and they don't think it through, and it's bad, and they don't blame the tech, they blame the brand. And then your client looks bad and you're kind of in trouble, and then it hurts all of you who are responsible about your storytelling and your authenticity. So do you see that continuing to happen, or you think that brands are being more responsible about it themselves now?
Like VR sickness in particular. Yeah,
Right.
It's easy to do.
Right.
So you do.
You hire the right team.
It really is, yeah. You have to be
But I think
aware and practiced,
yeah.
and have the ability to kind of test those features out.
Yeah, and I'm sure all of us want to create the best experience for our brands and their customers, because I believe all of us want to see this succeed. And I really firmly believe that this is the next big computing revolution.
You brought up a good point. When stereo came out, that was massive. I'm going to leave the films. I won't say the films, but there were a couple films that broke the idea. They pushed the gimmick way too far.
Right.
And
Are you talking about 3D, and when they would take a 2D film and translate it, and then everybody said, "Forget this, I'm not paying
there was
for that."
a period of incredible excitement, and we were all excited about it. I mean, we wanted to do everything in stereo, right? But then they went through a dry period where it went to gimmick and it went way too far. They didn't follow best practices, and we suffered as the industry suffered because of that. Right now, for us as content creators, having excellent premium content, and premium content doesn't mean expensive. Premium content means great impact.
It's a great point. Thank you for
You know,
sharing.
is good content can be $1,000. It can be $1 million. But it's got best practices. It's pushing technology, but it's pushing it in a way that it drives the experience. And the challenge, I mean, at Forrester Research, I can pull up 10 articles in the past month, and they're all pointed the same. PC Upload said it this last week. The biggest challenge to this entire space is good premium content.
Totally.
We're in a place now that the vacuum like as I said earlier, the creative and the good content has to catch up. Or what you're going to do is you're going to have early adopters. I call it blue hair to blue hair. My blue hair niece and my blue hair grandma, she can put on a piece of, a cardboard and go, oh, that's cool. Is this artistry? Or my blue haired niece who's like, wants the experience, but she's going to stay in it. If she doesn't see something that she likes, we lose her.
Yeah.
So I think that's the period we're going into right now, is that we've got to do.
I guess with any new technology.
It's a fine line you have to walk, right? Because you want to experiment and
Yes.
you want to push,
Yeah.
but you also need to ensure that it is the best that it can
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
But how do you test it? I mean, if you hang out in a barbershop long enough, eventually you get a haircut, but then you guys all go to the same salon. So how do you really know if it makes them sick? I mean, what point do you start to...
We let the guy with the longest hair.
After that,
That's always the case, though. I mean, there reaches a point in development where you are the worst testers, period. You can't test your own
Yep.
gear.
we're in the bubble.
You know everything just subconsciously not to do to make it work well. So at some point you do have to open that up.
And then you take the risk of if you show it too early to your client and they don't get it.
Well, and that's a big part of the education process. This is development. You need to be aware that you're going to see things during development that are going to freak you out, and you'll think it will never get made.
But because it's different than the other traditional marketing we've been involved with, right? And I think we've gone to great lengths to be very transparent about the process of creating this content. And the clients do need to see the early stuff, and they do need to see the rough stuff. And we need to, do our job of educating them about why it is, where it is, and where it's going.
Is it like when you're building a house and you have all the plans and you're all excited and you've picked out the tile and then you go, oh, I should move that wall. And all of a sudden, there goes the budget. And so the more you plan in advance, you can only plan so far because you're reinventing, you're creating whole new things.
By the way, that's a great application for VR.
It is,
Tell
actually.
us about that.
Well, I mean, that solves a problem.
Yeah, because
If
you can test it.
Right. So, I mean, if you talk to an architect and you talk to any developer, right, the thing that's a killer is a change order for anybody who's ever built a house or developed a building, because they can't visualize it, they can't see it. They don't know what scale looks like when you're just looking at a blueprint or even one of those beautiful looking rendering.
I
Right?
think, is it
we
Lowe's?
We could build this room.
Lowe's did something super cool and super simple.
Yeah, Lowe's rolled out a kitchen design. You can just go into a Lowe's that is equipped with a HoloLens, and you can design your kitchen. And you can see it.
Stand inside of it.
You can see it. You can stand inside of it right there in front of you, and you can also see it as a small dollhouse view. We call it dollhouse view.
Yeah.
Well, I know that in furniture, one of the biggest things is returns because they think the couch will fit and it doesn't. And I know I had heard a podcast, they were using furniture for that. You can say, well, does that fit or does this fit? And like you said, it helps make it a more turnkey return on investment, gets them into that sales loop to actually get a purchase.
And again, it solves the need and the problem.
And it solves the need and the problem because you understand why it's being created in the first place.
There is no industry that this technology won't touch. I think it is ubiquitous.
Yeah.
It will involve everyone.
Yeah. And obviously, I think we mentioned it earlier, which is, but it's, if you take your product, you take your company, you take your whatever it is you are, it's not about that. It's, again, about the emotion to it. I saw friends of mine at RSA made something simple for, what's the insurance company? I think it was, sorry guys, I don't remember the company, but insurance, not so sexy, right? Maybe not. And what they said is like, what's your biggest fear? Why do you get insurance on your car? My family members breaking down in the middle of the night, your daughter or your wife. That's now all of a sudden we've moved from the product of solving the problem to something that is a fear base. It's emotion. That's my fear. And so that's what they did. Basically, you can strap it on. I think it's Mercury Insurance, if I recall. You can get in there and you can understand what it feels like to be outside a car in the middle of nowhere with a flashlight, walking down the street, and you're scared crapless. And imagine, so the idea is there, always be covered.
I'm trying to picture Geico doing that. I don't know.
That? Well, at the end of the day, what did it do? It reminded me viscerally of the need of why insurance is important. I mean, at the end of the day, there's the message. But it was also entertaining and kind of cool because it was spooky and, you know.
Yeah, and to reinforce with that, with the emotion, like when VR is done right, you know, good VR plus your brain equals real emotions that you're
learning.
And real learning, yeah.
Yeah, Chris Milk from Verse did the VR with a Syrian refugee and then showed it to world leaders to say this is what, to create empathy, this is what it feels like to be, you know, in a refugee camp, because it just all looks in a headline or something, and it makes it more real. So content is king and context is queen, and they must be married together, apparently. And story is, in every session, they always talk about story. But the simpler the better. It's harder to write less. I mean, talk about maybe how you can take something that seems like a high concept. I mean, you described a very simple situation. You're in the woods, and you're scared, and you realize you need insurance, and you really feel why that's so important. You're in an earthquake, that's why you need earthquake insurance. So maybe tell me a good example where you took something, big data for Salesforce, for example, and were able to simply get the point across, like a 30-second promo.
Well, that's a long process to get to simplicity.
It's hard.
And trying to figure out where to, yeah. So, I'll just say that is a process to get to that point. When you do get to a point where it becomes obvious and simple to engage and understand, and understanding that information, regardless if it's a narrative piece or if it's a piece of data, it doesn't matter. You need to be aware that it's actually there. And you do need to find points in your experience that help lead that person intuitively through that experience. Doesn't matter what it is. You need to understand how to move, how to navigate, and how to interact with that environment.
You actually transitioning to technology. Physical social cues, audio is very important. Is the visual first? Is the sound first? Like, how do you prioritize? Because you need, how I survived a bear attack, you need to hear the bear so that you know to turn. But I know that it's evolving. How is the spatial sound technology working now? Is it getting better?
Sound makes the picture better.
Yeah.
That's it is.
It's half the story.
It is. It's, have you ever, I did
Most
this.
of the feeling.
This is kind of a college thing, but you can take an old movie like from the 70s and then throw new music on it, just turn the soundtrack up. All of a sudden, it's a new movie, right? And that's the same thing with sound. I think sound, it's massively important. It enhances the experience just like touch or haptics does. It's an incredible part, but it is from us. It's almost a crafted component, because when storytelling, and we can get in a whole topic about that, which is how do you use it as a narrative cue? How do you use it to progress the story? There's other forms of sound in this space of VR, other than just great music and great sound design.
Is the technology there for that, and how do you find people who know how? I mean, when you go to staff these productions, I understand. I'm told that gaming is one good place, but where do you? I mean, it's got to be good for Hollywood, right?
Game developers have been doing it for years.
Yeah. Same.
Because you get
you get a 360 audio engine, so just exactly the same as it works with visually. You turn to the left and everything pans along with it.
And it tracks you. What is it, like heat tracking or something?
And really,
there's spatial audio
just
though,
know
too.
where
There's a cue behind you.
I see.
So even if I'm looking in one direction, I can hear a sound in the other. So
with this, and where it's different in games, and like you said, it's been around forever. It sells the idea that you're in a 360 environment. That's what it does. It sells when you have things going around you or in front of you or behind you. It's part of the sell.
It's just like the fan on you mentioned earlier, where you feel the
wire.
wind blow.
Yeah.
You hear,
And that's the thing that I think is really important, is that anybody who thinks about this new media doesn't think that this is the next evolution of filmmaking, because it's not. What it really is a brand new thing, and it needs to focus on experiences. So I think that narrative suddenly becomes a lot less important, and because people aren't just sitting there passively, they want to interact with what's happening around them.
They're a participant in the story. Yeah.
So the more that you can make it feel like an experience. So now getting back to branding, we were approached by some friends of ours who were launching a new whiskey company. Whiskey is something that old guys sit in sweaters and in dark rooms and drink, right, this dark brown liquid.
Cigar.
And that hurts me.
Calling me old? I mean, I was like, you just described my Saturday night.
But here's what happened, right? So we had a brand came to us, and they said, we're launching this thing called Beach Whiskey. I don't know if anybody's heard about this. Beach Whiskey. I'm like, what's that? It's clear. It has a flavor that they're saying is more female friendly because it's a little sweeter, etc. And they went, well, we know that we have to create a new experience that people can imagine what that's going to be like, so that they'll want to drink clear whiskey that's maybe a little bit sweet on a beach. And so we said, well, let's create an experience that will simulate what you want them to do. So we went to Key West with this country artist named Jake Owen.
Another tough project.
6 months.
It actually was.
You know, all VR needs to be shot on a beach, by the way. It's very
I'll have what
important.
he's having.
Or a mountain, or skiing, or something.
But that's an example of how we created an experience that simulated and emulated what they want their consumers to feel, right? This hot young country star, you're standing on a beach, and then we did some interesting things as well because, you know, we're so used to in 2D where you are looking one direction and then the cuts happen. Well, if I'm looking this direction and the software knows I'm looking this direction, well, I can do whatever I want back there. And then with an audio cue or a visual cue, make you turn around. And then when you turn around, you're in a different place. I mean, we can stitch together.
You can be in Italy or something.
You can stitch together this room and a redwood forest or a cliff and a boardroom or whatever.
Can you explain that, the stitching part of it, for those who, does everybody know what that is? I mean, maybe you want to just talk about what that does to the narrative, because it's different than when you are looking and you have control over your lens in one direction. Could you just talk about stitching and storytelling, how that is, how it impacts it?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I think this guy over here with the cool hat can talk about it in great
Back to
detail
you,
as
Chuck.
well.
Well, I don't know if it's as much impact in the storytelling as it is the quality of the experience. The stitching is more of a, basically,
It's the boundaries.
you have a bunch of pictures all around you that are all simultaneously being shot by the cameras, and the idea is that you have to stitch it together so that it feels like you're in a 360 environment.
But what
So
if
that's
you miss a stitch?
You're in real trouble.
You
Then that's
can't
where
miss a
you put a
stitch,
palm
yeah.
tree there,
Yeah.
back to the beach.
Exactly.
How do give me an example? Okay, so that worked apparently. What would make it not authentic? Because authenticity is important. Because if you doesn't feel like the beach and you don't have the wind and you don't have the scent, so you don't have that smell necessarily. Give me an example where you thought it would be authentic and the audience said no way. And of course, it wasn't anything you guys did. But
Well, the first thing that becomes troublesome is if the camera starts moving the wrong way, because that sends a signal to your brain that you're drunk, that the room is either spinning or twisting or something like that. I mean, we're pretty comfortable in this realm of moving straight forward, nice and smooth, and that's kind of about it, right? I mean, as soon as you start going up, it's, you know, and different people have different thresholds for this. So it has to be done carefully. But then again, it comes back to that question that you said about best practices, the right frame rates, the right bit rates, et cetera, et cetera. And if it's not done correctly, people, even with the strongest stomachs, will start to not feel real good.
and that's a buzzkill on VR for sure. Yeah, it's the biggest concern.
I think it's a promotional opportunity for, bags with your brand on it or something. I mean, it's all the way you look
Bark
at
bag
it.
included. Great. So you've got the client there, and then they go, okay, well, I think I can figure out which is the best way to measure it, or at least know that I need a singular experience or a sales presentation experience or a out of home. But then how much does it cost, and how do you budget it? And you're dealing with is it CPM? Like, what is it how do you charge for it, and how can the agency charge for it? How does everybody get a piece of the pie?
That always comes up, right? I mean,
Always.
Everyone has an idea or this lofty goal or a big idea, but the realities, in particular, what Fuel focuses on, which really is developing a 3D world, that takes people to build. And we just have enough experience. I think a lot of studios out there have enough experience actually developing that type of content, so you can easily take an idea and break it down. But I think it can be a little shocking. Your budgets are a bit higher than say, straightforward, say, shoot.
And as it becomes more, when it becomes more it's widespread and common, it won't be as expensive, obviously, because this is new. But it's still not going to be cheap. It's not cheap to shoot film. It's just it takes bodies, like you said.
I think
It's
the
it's
tools-
12:30, so we're going to take one more comment. No, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think as the tools mature, that's going to help bring down costs. But it is a little bit Wild West, like just from a production standpoint.
We didn't get a chance to do Q&A. It's just, I said to them, we could do this all day. They could talk about this all day, and I could listen to them all day, and you guys could probably ask them questions all day. But
And we can listen to ourselves all day. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
But I think what we'll do, since we didn't get a chance to do a Q&A, is if you guys don't mind sticking around for just a few minutes, if you have some specific questions. Is there anything glaring that you feel that was missed? Does somebody have a burning question that the room should hear? Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, panelists. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Having us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cynthia Lieberman. I guess I never introduced myself. Introduced everybody else. Thank you very much for coming.